On the 43rd Annual Summit of the Center for Youth and Social Development, CYSD, I would like to appreciate the efforts made by CYSD in the field of tribal development over last more than 4 decades. What I have gathered is, under the guidance of Mr. Jagananda and his co-founder, CYSD has been doing great work for tribal population in Odisha since 1982. CYSD has been working in tribal areas of Odisha in the field of livelihood, education, skill development, research, etc. Out of 62 tribes residing in Odisha, CYSD has worked with 23 tribes. The organizational strategy of CYSD for 2020 to 2027 for development of the tribals in Odisha is to strengthen community food system, social protection, health and education, as well as institutions such as women's self-help groups, farmer producers organizations, and to complement the efforts of the government to double the income of farmers. The topic chosen for the foundation lecture of CYSD is very apt and is the tribal development in India with focus on the state of Odisha. Moreover, what a background there tribal in India. That background will explain the tribals man avastha emti kainki. Let me start with giving a brief historical perspective. Tribals and non-tribals in India had entirely different cultures and way of living. The tribes were lords and masters of the territory, of the land they held and occupied. They lived in forests and for their livelihood depended on forest produce as well as agriculture. In tribal areas, the community owned the forests and the land, and there was no notion of private property. Jette sabu property thala society, community. Private property wal kichi disa nahi. This was the basic way, system that was prevailing in tribal areas. When I was in Guwahati High Court, we came across a case from Arunachal Pradesh. And we found nobody owned private property. Everything belonged to the society. And I was surprised. Ye kaun? Kahar private property nahi? And amar notion was private property. Let me quote Rousseau here. Rousseau said, all property belongs to the community, all land belongs to the community. Till one intelligent person circled a piece of land and said, this is mine, and others were foolish enough to believe it. That's the private concept. Everything was community. But concept of private property grew gradually. Rousseau, Locke, they have discussed how it has grown. During the British rule, tribes were brought under the same legal and administrative structure that existed for the larger society. The tribes therefore came under the laws, rules, regulations related to land, forest crimes and punishment that were alien to them. Revenue collectors and administrative officials were converted into owners and landlords, and this led to large-scale eviction of tribes from the land, and in that place non-tribals who owned better agricultures could pay higher rent, started having control over land. Moreover, there were massive transfers of land from tribals to non-tribals through mortgage, for loans, sale, fraud, deceit, etc. And gradually, the tribals started losing land to non-tribals. Aste aste, tribal community avastha kharab hi challa. British government also made laws taking over the forests, and the tribals lost the right to collect fuel and all other necessities. ट्राइबल कम्युनिटी से फॉरेस्ट चढ़ुले फॉरेस्ट रु जहाँ प्रोड्यूस होता कलेक्ट करते खाऊले फ्यूएल कलेक्ट करते till the British government came and the law all forest belongs to government. Once that happened, जे यदि फ्यूएल नहीं कि जाऊँची तार घर रोषे करियो बोली चोरी करछु theft धरा पड़ला. So if you see the Forest Act that British laws passed, they said all forests belong to government. So this is how tribals lost the right to forest produce and forest land. As the tribals were losing their access to the livelihood, they took to rebellion and in many tribal areas. In response to these revolts by the tribals, the British government introduced Regulation 10 of 1822, including a non-regulatory system for the administration of difficult and inaccessible areas, which were mainly the tribal areas, difficult areas, no regulation call it. Under this British initiative, the tribals were allowed to govern their own tradition as per their own tradition and their customary practices. These legal and administrative arrangements, however, did not restrict the movement of non-tribals to tribal areas, except the northeast region of the country. There, inline permits were required to move in. Tribals and the non-tribals came to be part of the same political and economic system, and this led to the non-tribal population, especially traders, merchants, moneylenders, gaining control of land, forest, and other resources which were earlier under the control of the tribes. Now, what did the Constitution of India do in 1950? The Constitution of India, which came into effect in 1950, has made various provisions to ensure that tribals in India are pulled out of social backwardness and integrated to larger Indian society. All tribals are Indian citizens and enjoy the same rights to equality and to personal liberty as non-tribals under Articles 14 and 20 of the Constitution. They also enjoy all freedoms under Article 19 of the Constitution, as do other citizens. Further, they have the right to vote like all other citizens. In addition, the Constitution confers certain special rights on tribals, such as reserved seats for admission in educational institutions. They are aware. Constitution makers भाविले जे हम ट्राइबल जब शेड्यूल कास्ट शेड्यूल ट्राइब्स तक सब बढ़िया उठियाक पड़िबो ये बहुत पछर अछंती तो तक पे स्पेशल प्रोविजंस करबो. So what special provisions are made? They have the right to vote like all others. In addition, the Constitution confers certain special rights to the tribals, such as reserved seats for admission in educational institutions, reservation of posts in public employment, and reservation of seats in parliament, state legislatures, and local self-institutions. Article 15(4) of the Constitution has also empowered the state to make special provisions for the advancement of scheduled tribes. However, despite provisions of the Constitution for reservation of posts in favor of scheduled tribes in the Union government and the state governments, these reserved posts remain unfilled by members of the scheduled tribes and are carried forward through subsequent recruitments. They were not qualified. They didn't come up to the standards. So there had to be an amendment made in that provision. Why? Because there was a provision also, Article 335 of the Constitution provides that the claims of members of scheduled tribes shall be taken into consideration consistently with the maintenance of efficiency and administration in making of appointments to services and posts in connection with the affairs of the Union or the state. A provision has been inserted under Article 335 of the Constitution by that provision shall be made in favor of members of scheduled tribes for relaxation in qualifying marks in an examination or lowering the standards of evaluation for reservation in matters of promotion. Yet, tribals are unable to secure the qualifying marks in the recruitment examinations or fulfill the standards of evaluation despite relaxation of qualifying marks or lowering these standards of evaluation by the government for promotion. Consequently, the share of tribes in the central government and the state government services is very low compared to the ratio of their population vis-a-vis the whole population. With the Chhattisgarh High Court Chief Justice Delhi, stenographer darkar pade for judges dictation debe judgments. Oh, stenographer recruitment scheduled tribe भी reservation होची, scheduled caste भी reservation होची. से test रे scheduled tribe रू केही qualify करने. सेटू रजिस्ट्रार कहले सर कौन करिया केही तो क्वालिफाई करनांती मुगल ट्राइबल्स कांती केही तो क्वालिफाई करनांती होले क्वालिफाई करनांती काय बेस्ट जो बना सब नहीं जाओ मोर पावर तला सब नहीं जाओ से शिखी जीवे काम करू करू एंड नॉनले से मोटे आसी परिबेनी. So I could feel that they cannot. Very difficult. Mr. Patnaik was the PSC chairman. He knows how difficult. But some of them used to do very well. There were very few. Therefore, the remedy is to ensure that members of the tribes get greater opportunities in education so that they can qualify in the recruitment examinations and have better standards of promotion. I remember also when Chhattisgarh Tili, Dr. Raman Singh, Chief Minister Tile, ସେ କହିଲେ ସାର୍ ଆମର ଯେତେ ଯାକ ରିଜର୍ଭଡ ଭେକେନ୍ସି ରହୁଛି ସେ ଆଇଏଏସ୍ ଅଫିସର କିଏ ଗୋଟେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ହେଇଛି ତାଙ୍କ ପିଲାମାନେ ନେଇଯାଉଛନ୍ତି. ତ ଆସି କହିଲେ ତା ମାନେ କ'ଣ ହେଲା? ବସ୍ତରରୁ କେହି ନେଇପାରୁନାହାନ୍ତି, ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଅଲରେଡ଼ି ଆଡଭାନ୍ସ କରିଯାଇଛନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କର ପିଲାମାନେ ନେଇଯାଉଛନ୍ତି. ସେଇପାଇଁ ସୁପ୍ରିମକୋର୍ଟରେ ରିଭ୍ୟୁ ଥିଙ୍କିଂ ହେଇଛି, why not introduce tribal layers also there in scheduled caste and scheduled tribes? ତାପରେ ବହୁତ ରେଜିଷ୍ଟେନ୍ସ ହେଉଛି. ରାଇଟ୍, ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଆଡଭାନ୍ସ କରି ଯାଉଛନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କ ପିଲାମାନେ ଭଲ କରୁଛନ୍ତି, ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଆଡଭାନ୍ସ କରିନାହାନ୍ତି ପଛରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି ତାକୁ ରିକ୍ରୁଟମେଣ୍ଟ ପାଇବା ଆଡମିସନ ପାଇବା ବହୁତ ଡିଫିକଲ୍ଟ ହେଉଛି. I do not have knowledge about educational opportunities for tribals in other states, but I found that the state of Odisha has many schools and hostels for tribals. मैं तो बुली देखुची केउंझर, सुंदरगढ़, मयूरभंज रे मुझे बहुत tribal schools अच्छी, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe exclusively meant for them, and they are being provided schooling facilities. Private educational institutions have the fundamental right under 19(1)(g) of the Constitution, the freedom to carry on their administration, including admission of students to their institutions, like your kids or many other organizations. Now, Supreme Court said they can also do, provide admissions, education, right to occupation under Article 19(1)(g), and tankara freedom. Therefore, they had to introduce Clause 5 in Article 15 of the Constitution, that this freedom of private institutions under Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution shall not prevent the state from making any provision by law for the advancement of scheduled tribes insofar as such provisions relate to their admission to educational institutions, including private educational institutions, whether aided or unaided. Right to Education Act, you know, आजकल ये ही चला. तादर एक provision अच्छी, जे school पाएंगे admissions by 25% of the schools, of the seats in a private school, they will be reserved for weaker sections, which include scheduled tribes, scheduled castes. That was challenged before the Supreme Court. And I was hearing that challenge in the Constitution bench of 5 judges. And I authored the judgment. The argument was that a scheduled tribe, scheduled caste pila kon am sang basi, general caste sang basi kon koribi, the standards kara mai jibo. We repelled this challenge. We held that after all there is also fraternity as one of the preambles of the Constitution. One brotherhood. So the scheduled tribes, scheduled castes have to be treated as part of our fraternity of India. And आपन केंद्र विद्यालय तो रिजर्वेशन अच्छी हाँ सेट तो पिला माने बोलो कर चुत्ता करो से स्कूल करते कुछ खराब होनी असुविधा कौन आला तेनो all these judgments have been delivered also in the Supreme Court. Now the union and the states therefore should now make laws reserving seats for admission not only in government education institutions, I don't know whether it has happened in Odisha, but also in private education institutions for members of scheduled tribe. This provision for reserving seats for members of scheduled tribes should be applied to not only schools but also to professional colleges, medical colleges, engineering colleges. You have to give them greater opportunities, reserve some seats and put them in. This will help the members of the scheduled tribe who advance in life and also improve the life of other family members. Reservation seats, reservation admission called labo, seats to reservation of post called labo con unless they come to standards. So you have to also bring them up in a positive way. I may like to share my experience in Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh se मतलब जीव जस्ती मगाटे वाटे पर्सनल सिक्योरिटी ऑफ साम दिया था से पर्सनल सिक्योरिटी से मतलब कहता सर I belong to a scheduled tribe in Madhya Pradesh. मोर दीटा को पिला नेशनल लॉ यूनिवर्सिटी भोपाल रे पढ़ुचंती मुगला अच्छा वेरी गुड आउ केमती पढ़ुचंती ना सीट्स रिजर्व्ड हिच and not only seats reserved ହେଇଛି merit ପାଇଲେ ତାକୁ ସେଇ କୋଟାରେ ପାଇଲେ ଏକ୍ସପେନ୍ସିସ୍ ବି ଦିଆହେଉଛି ମଧ୍ୟପ୍ରଦେଶ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଦେଉଛି ଗୋଟାଏ ପୁଅ ମୋର ଅଲରେଡି ପାସ୍ ଆଉଟ୍ କରିଗଲାଣି ଇଜ୍ ଇନ୍ ଅ ଭେରି ନାଇସ୍ ଜବ୍ ଇନ୍ କର୍ପୋରେଟ୍ ସବ୍ କର୍ପୋରେଟ୍ ସେକ୍ଟର and second ପିଲାଟା ବି ତାର କ୍ୟାମ୍ପସ୍ ସିଲେକ୍ସନରେ ସିଲେକ୍ଟ ହେଇକି ପାଇଯିବ that is how tribal grows up. One family grows up, he pulls up others. ଆପଣ ବହିଟା ପଢ଼ନ୍ତୁ ଡେଟେଡ୍ ଦ ଗ୍ରେଟ୍ ଏସ୍କେପ୍ Nobel laureate. It's a good book. How a family grows up. ମୋ ବାପା ବଡ଼ ବୁଝାଥିଲେ ସିଏ ଆସିଲି ପାଠ ପଢ଼ିଲେ ବଡ଼ ବଡ଼ ଚାକିରି କଲେ ବିଜନେସ୍ କଲେ ସେ ଗ୍ରୋ କଲେ ଆଉ ଦୁଇଟା ଭାଇକୁ ଗ୍ରୋ କଲେ ପିଲାମାନେ ପଢ଼ିଲେ ସବୁ ପଢ଼ିଲେ one member of the family does very well in life, he brings up everybody in the family. That is how the growth, the social mobility takes place. That is how we expect tribals also to grow. Tribals who are not keen on professional education or college education can also be trained in different skills after completion of the schooling. You want to podi parna podi say interest nahi padiya pe. Once they are skilled, they'll be able to earn a decent livelihood from themselves and their family members. Or monachi skill development पे क्या में बुलदुल केउंझर डिस्ट्रिक्ट है वो इंस्टीट्यूशन इतना जो उठी खाली जियो माने को टेलरिंग सिखुचु थे जियो माने आओ से जियो माने ट्राइबल गर्ल्स जियो माने टेलरिंग सीखी नहीं चेन्नई रहे चाकरी करचु से झील मैंने देखले झील मैंने तो सेठी थिले आम खाली कथा बापा मांग सागर बापा सागर पचारू केमती एक्सपीरियंस कौन आज्ञा झील मैंने चिन्ह चाकरी कर पठाऊँ आमको रेमिट कर चलुँ बेस टका पठाऊँ केउंझर रे आ गोटे गवर्नमेंट यूनिट जो सिल्क गवर्नमेंट तैयारी होती सेठी बहुत ट्राइबल्स झील मान को वीविंग सिल्क वीविंग केमती सिखाऊँ एंड जहाँ से प्रोड्यूस कर गवर्नमेंट्स सब बिक्री हो पचारे किसी असुविधा हो केउंझर पाखे सो दीज आर द वेज हाउ यू कैन गिव देम अ गुड लिविंग रिमेंबर लाइवलीहुड पैसा अर्निंग ना किसी हम पैसा अर्निंग कले लेट देम लिव देयर ओन लाइफ दैट इज देयर ओन ट्रेडिशन ओन कस्टम्स Therefore, the tribals have to be skilled to do different jobs which can give them employment either with the government or in private organizations. The fifth schedule of the Constitution made provisions for administration and control of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes. The fifth schedule provides that the executive power of a state extend to scheduled areas in the state, but is subject to the provisions of the fifth schedule. The governor of each state having scheduled areas are required to submit a report to the president regarding the administration of scheduled areas in that state, and the executive power of union extends to giving directions to the state as to the administration of scheduled areas. Tribes Advisory Council is established in each state having scheduled areas and any state having scheduled tribes but no scheduled areas. The Tribes Advisory Council consists of members not less than 3/4 of whom are representatives of scheduled tribes in the Legislative Assembly. The duty of Tribes Advisory Council is to advise on such matters pertaining to welfare and advancement of scheduled tribes as may be referred to them by the governor. The governor has been empowered to direct that any particular act of parliament or a legislative assembly shall not apply to a tribal area, a scheduled area or part thereof, or shall apply to scheduled area or part thereof as he may specify in the notification. The governor may make regulations for the peace and good governance of any scheduled area of the state after consulting the Tribes Advisory Council of state. All such regulations has to be submitted to the president, and until then such regulations shall no effect. The provisions H, but they are hardly implemented. They are hardly implemented. I have noticed that these are not implemented. If you read also the books on tribal, they say they are not implemented, though they were there. So the governors have not been performing their duties under the fifth schedule. Even the Tribes Advisory Council constituted by the state have hardly played any effective role in safeguarding the interests of tribal population. This would be evident from the fact that large tribal populations have been displaced by development projects in India, such as dams, mines, industries, and wildlife sanctuaries. This will also be evident from the fact that there has been land alienation from the tribes to non-tribes on a wide scale even after adoption of the Constitution. So governors also, our Constitution made elaborate provisions for fifth schedule, but the governor did not play his role. This is very important. Even after the Constitution was enforced, the forest policy of the government is more geared towards increasing the revenue of the government than providing for better livelihood to tribals. Revenue, auction, kath auction habo, टंका आसिबो, ये आसिबो, किंतु ट्राइबल एरिया जो माने डिपेंड ऊपर थिले, तांकर कौन अवस्था हबो, ये टाइप ऑफ फॉरेस्ट पॉलिसी फॉलो कले, से चिंता हला नहीं आगुरु. कहीं हला नहीं मु कही भी, because according to you, most of the persons who are formulating policies, they don't belong to the tribals. तांको ये चिंता होबो नहीं मोटे. As a result of this forest policy followed by the government, the tribals have been deprived of their customary resource rights. Historically, the contribution of tribals to the forest wealth is much more compared to the contribution of non-tribes. Governments have been justifying the displacement of tribals for the development of projects on the ground that these projects bring in immense benefits to the country and the locality, such as employment, roads, irrigation facilities, generation of power. Unfortunately, though the tribal population has had to sacrifice a lot for these development projects, the benefits of such development projects have hardly accrued to them. I may give a few examples. It was found in 1988, after 30 years of filling the Hirakud reservoir, compensation amount rupees 15 crores was due for payment to 913 claimants who had lost the land. In the case of Machkund hydroelectric project, only a few households enjoyed the benefit of being rehabilitated and the benefits of the project was hardly received by the displaced. The displacement of tribal population for the Upper Kolar project was justified on the ground that provided irrigation, electric power, tourism, pisciculture, and other schemes for economic development, but the displaced did not receive these benefits. For the steel plant at Kalinganagar, large tracts of land were acquired despite resistance from the tribal population, which was displaced. Development projects in India have therefore not benefited the tribal population. The poverty amongst the tribals in India may have reduced, it has reduced, certainly reduced, but not to the same extent as it has declined in the non-tribal areas. Instead of tribal population making progress to integrate with the non-tribal population, the gap between the two has remained the same or has widened. I remember at the same time I met Mr. Naveen Patnaik when this Kalinganagar, POSCO, he was facing problem. I told him, why don't you go in for rehabilitation? Just compensation will not do. He said the law was the old British law, 1894 Land Acquisition Act. It didn't provide for rehabilitation. So then he said, yes, we must introduce a policy of rehabilitation. It was introduced by executive policy. Later on I will show how it has become part of law. By the Constitution's 73rd Amendment Act 1992, Part 9 was on the panchayats, was introduced providing constitution of panchayats in every state at the village, intermediate and district levels, and for empowering the Gram Sabha to perform such functions at the village level. These panchayats and Gram Sabhas were to be constituted by a law made by the legislature of state. The object was to devolve powers. Very good object. This object was to devolve powers and authority to the panchayats to enable them to function as an institution of local self-government with respect to A, the preparation of plans for economic development and social justice, and the implementation of schemes for economic development and social justice as may be entrusted to them. These schemes were to be in respect of matters enumerated 11th schedule of the Constitution, such as agriculture, land improvement, minor irrigation, animal husbandry, dairy farming, dairy, poultry, farming, etc. In 1996, Parliament enacted the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act. By this Act, the provisions of Part 9 of the Constitution related to Panchayats were extended to scheduled areas, subject to such exceptions and modifications as provided in the Act. Section 4 of the Act provided that the legislature of a state shall not make any law under Part 9 which is inconsistent with any of the features mentioned in Section 4 of the Act. These provisions are meant to ensure that Gram Sabhas and Panchayats at the intermediate level and district level are involved in the plans, programs and projects for socio-economic development in the region and are consulted before making the acquisition of land in scheduled areas and before resettling rehabilitated persons affected by such persons in the scheduled areas. The state of Odisha has amended the Odisha Panchayat Samiti Act 1959, the Gram Panchayat Act 1964 and the Odisha Jilla Parishad Act 1991 to incorporate the 5th schedule provisions in lines indicated in the Panchayat Extension of to Scheduled Areas Act 1996. See, such a wonderful provision. आपण से ग्राम सभा को बचाना तो डेवलपमेंट करिया गुरु लैंड एक्विजिशन करिया गुरु इकोनॉमिक प्रोग्राम कंसल्ट द ग्राम सभा or the panchayats at the intermediate level, at the district level. Ask them, take their views, then do it. Then only there will be some kind of a decentralized system of development. Because I always think people in Delhi cannot decide the future of Odisha. This is my conviction because I have seen it in Northeast. When I was in Guwahati, they don't understand the Northeast. They could not understand what is Manipur. It is impossible. I have functioned in Guwahati High Court for 8 years, also in Manipur. Impossible for the people in Delhi to understand what is happening. Their thoughts are different, their thinking is different, their culture is different, their ways are different. It is impossible. Well, similarly, officers sitting or rulers sitting in Bhubaneswar cannot understand what the needs of the tribals. Decentralized powers, needs of the rural areas. Unfortunately, the provisions of Panchayat Extension Schedule Act 1996 as applied to 5th schedule areas have not been effectively implemented. So as to devolve powers of the Gram Panchayats, Gram Sabhas and Panchayats at the intimate district level. Now I will give an example here. When I was Chief Justice of Madhya Pradesh, I got a PL challenging acquisition of land. On behalf of tribals, that PL was filed by a famous group, Veda Patikar. कौन है इची? ना हमारा लैंड वाला सो एक्विजिशन नोटिफिकेशन इची बहुत बड़ा लैंड ट्राइबल बने करो गोटे केनाल करिया पेस्ट मु कहले भलो कथा असुविधा कोन हला कहले हमर एठी पानी भर्ती ऑल मार्च एरियास कादुओ वेल इरिगेटेड लैंड एटी हम लैंड का नहीं आउच केना करिया पे how she showed me the provisions of this PESA 1996 and says it provides Gram Sabha consult karo. I gave notice. Both state government and central government they considered I consult kara hi nahi. Ade hela kemti na agya contract sign hegala with the contractor. Contract is for 900 crores for doing the canal work. And it was signed at Bhopal. 900 crores. And this is happening just before the election. See the state of affairs. I can't put this in writing here. But this is how decisions are taken. No interest of tribals. Some political interest is there. Right. In 2006, now new development has come. In the UPA government came, this is one of the best developments we have taken in law. The Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act was enacted by Parliament to correct the historic injustice done to the forest dwellers and forest communities, mostly tribals, who were cultivating, occupying forest land and using forest produce, but had lost their rights on them. This act recognized and vested forest rights in forest dwelling scheduled tribes in the states in respect of all forest rights mentioned in section 3 of the act, such as the right to own and live in the forest. They can get real patta, get a patta in the forest land. Under individual or common occupation, community pattas, individual pattas for habitation. For self-cultivation, cultivation by means of patta. Livelihood, the right to ownership, access to use, dispose of minor forest produce, which had been traditionally collected within and outside the village boundaries of the state. Section 6 of this Act provides that Gram Sabhas shall be the authority to initiate the process of determining the nature and extent of individual or community forest rights, or both, that may be given to forest dwelling, scheduled tribes, and other traditional forest dwellers with the local limits of jurisdiction under the Act, receiving claims. This is all done by Gram Sabhas, but this unfortunately again has not been implemented fully. Pattas have not been received by many. I was in Keonjhar district, I was in Surya district. I met a number of tribals having a group discussion, and the tribals said, we have not yet received the pattas. So, why 2006 to act already? In Madhya Pradesh, when the Chief Justice, this act was challenged before me in a PIL. I no notice, dismissed it straight away. Why? Some forest contractors may have challenged it, or some forest officers may have challenged it, who have interest in the forests. Right? So this is what has happened. Perhaps the worst measure is inflicting upon tribals, non-tribals, was the acquisition of land by the government under the Land Acquisition Act 1894. I have told you, 1894 Act, the British Tribals were acted, only compensation. Solatium, compensation, solatium, interest, that's all. Under this act, when the land was acquired from the owners, they were paid only compensation for the land, but they were not rehabilitated. No rehabilitation. Agriculturists who were totally dependent on agriculture and had no other skills for earning the livelihood were deprived of land for various projects by the government with some meager compensation of money, which lasted for few years, and thereafter the landowner was without any livelihood. The tribals therefore have registered land acquisition for development projects. There were large scale protests by the tribals for acquisition of land for a steel plant in Nagar, Odisha, you know that. Vedanta and Sterlite wanted to take some bauxite mines in Niyamgiri Hills. However, the Supreme Court referred to the rights of tribal and forest dwellers under this 2006 Act, Scheduled Tribes and Other Tribal Act, as well as the PESA. This Act had PESA and held that the question whether scheduled tribes or other forest dwellers such as Dungeria Kond, Kutia Kondho and others have any religious rights over the Niyamgiri Hills have to be considered by the Gram Sabhas and directed that the matter be placed before the Gram Sabhas for their active consideration. Pursuant to said directions, the Gram Sabhas of the affected villages of Niyamgiri passed resolutions opposing bauxite mining, and the mining in and around Niyamgiri Hills was accordingly stalled. Thus, the Gram Sabhas and Panchayats at the intimate and district level can now protect the rights of tribals and new laws made by Parliament. This is a very important thing. Right? These rights have been now given to the Gram Sabhas to protect the rights. Recently, I read in the newspapers, they are again reconsidering these Gram Sabhas. They want they must now, some bauxite mining should take place, their development. But let them decide. Let the Gram Sabhas decide. The Land Acquisition Act 1894 was repealed and replaced by the right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act 2013. Another new act has come. How important law is gradually developing, catching up, right? That's because of the political process, because of democracy, because of adult franchise. People who want to be in power, they are also thinking of how to get votes from the tribal areas. Right. This 2013 Act had made elaborate provisions for preparation of social impact assessment study for land acquisition, appraisal of social impact assessment report by expert group, payment of fair compensation to landowners based on determination of market value of land and things attached to land or building rehabilitation, and resettlement of the affected families. If you read that act, elaborate provisions have been made. Tremendous safeguard. Section 41 of this act made provisions for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and provides that no acquisition shall be done, and such acquisition shall be done as a last resort. This section also provides that in scheduled areas, prior consent of the concerned Gram Sabha or Panchayats has to be obtained before land acquisition, and in the case of displacement of scheduled areas, scheduled tribes, families, a development plan shall be prepared for settling and restoring the titles of scheduled tribes on land, etc. It's a very, very important development. in 2013. This present government, the BJP government, did make an attempt to amend this act in 2013. And many social activists told me from Madheba, asked me whether this will get amended. I said, don't worry, the government will not be able to amend it. Why? They are also scared of elections. When the move was being made to amend it, they lost the Bihar elections, they lost the Delhi elections. Right? So they did not touch it. They said whichever state wants to amend it on its own, in the concurrent field, they can do it, but central government will not do it. So this happened. Thus, Parliament has during the years 1996 to 2013 enacted several new acts making special provisions for the advancement of tribal population and particularly scheduled tribes. Despite these enactments, there has been only marginal improvement in the lives of tribals in India compared to the improvement in the lives of general population. One reason for this is that the government has not been able to provide sufficient public investments in tribal areas for tribal development. The Ministry of Tribal Affairs of central government, set up in 1999, deals with tribal problems and coordinates activities of other ministries for providing tribal people. They should do this, but they are not doing it. It has confined itself to schemes for which budgets are provided, such as distribution of scholarships and grants to non-government organizations. MOTA has not yet ensured that basic services in education, health or nutrition reach the tribal hamlets. The state government of Odisha also has not provided sufficient funds for development of tribal areas. Even the revenue collected from mining in tribal areas have been spent on development of non-tribal areas. See, if you read the constitution, there is one, the constitution fund of India. The other is public funds. All revenue gets into, most of the revenues gets into public funds, which doesn't go to constitution of India. A consulate fund of the state. So state government has got total control over OT kharcha karibe. Tokata keunjharu asto, ente kharcha epare purire. And it all depends how much of political pull that particular area has in the government concern. You see, these things were striking us. And when I went to the Supreme Court, at least I was very conscious how this has to be changed. So now we brought in some changes in the Supreme Court that I'll say, how resources collected from Keunjhar has to be spent on Keunjhar. Resources collected from Mayurvanj has to be spent in Mayurvanj, or at least in tribal areas, and should not go to the coastal areas and other areas. Very, very important. As resources were not coming for the development of tribal areas, the Green Bench of the Supreme Court hearing, T.N. Gauramanam, in one Green Bench was hearing some event matters, directed on 27/1/2014 that 50% of the additional amounts of net present value recovered by the state of Odisha from mining leases. You see, what happens now is, in this case the Supreme Court held, if you want to deforest any area for some development work, whatever it may be, maybe industry, maybe road, maybe mining, anything, then double of that, double of the area has to be forested again. For that, whatever money is there, we will calculate it net present value, and the agency or the private sector, whichever wants that development work, must deposit the money for forest development. So that more forest. That is how the Supreme Court has been able to increase the forest area in the country. It has increased now by this process. You deforest certain area, twice the area must forest and provide the money. That is how the Supreme Court is done. That is called net present value. Now directed on 27/1/2014 that 50% of the additional amounts of net present value recovered by the state of Odisha from mining leases will be used by the state of Odisha through a special purpose vehicle, SPV, for undertaking specific tribal welfare and area development works so to ensure intrusive growth of mineral bearing areas. An SPV was registered as a society, namely Society for Inclusive Development of Mineral Bearing Areas of Odisha under the Societies Registration Act, and a scheme for development of tribals was prepared by the state of Odisha. On 28/4/2014, the Green Bench of the Supreme Court perused the scheme prepared by the government of Odisha and also recommended by the centrally empowered committee in this regard, and directed that ad hoc campa to transfer to SPV 50% of the additional amount of NPV within a month for undertaking tribal welfare and development works. At that time, it was around 800-900 crores. It was deposited, and that is how successor became a company under Section 8 of the 2013 Companies Act called the OMBADC. And this is how this OMBADC started functioning and doing work in this Keonjhar, Mayurvanj, Sundargarh, even Koraput area, they did that work. Then once OMBADC was created, subsequently, as you know, a lot of penalties were imposed by the government of Odisha for unauthorized mining. And they collected about 17,000 crores, 16,000 crores. With interest, we went up 17,000 crores. And the Supreme Court upheld the levy of penalties by the state government and further directed that huge amounts collected by pure penalty will be made available by the state government of Odisha to OMBADC for tribal welfare area development works. On 29/10/2018, the Supreme Court passed orders appointing oversight authorities. They appointed me to oversee the work and progress carried out by OMBADC, and also directed OMBADC may give priority to providing which are the projects they would take it up. You see, in mining area, Panita affected, polluted by minerals. So that is why, what are the priority areas? Provided pipe drinking water, then improvement health services. Health is also affected by inhaling polluted air. Then improve education services in the districts of Keonjhar, Sundargarh, Mayurvanj, and nearby districts which are affected by pollution. This is how this work is now being done to this morning. Till now, OMBADC has sanctioned an amount of rupees 18,215.12 crores towards agriculture, farmer empowerment, sports and youth services. ଆପଣ ଦେଖିଥିବେ ବହୁତ ଗୁଡ଼ା ଜାଗାରେ ଖବର କାଗଜ ବାହାରୁଛି, ପିଲାମାନେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ପିଲାମାନେ ହକି ଖେଳୁଛନ୍ତି, ବ୍ୟାଡମିଣ୍ଟନ ଖେଳୁଛନ୍ତି, ଟେବୁଲ ଟେନିସ୍ ଖେଳୁଛନ୍ତି, swimming କରୁଛନ୍ତି. They are OMBADC funded and some GMFC funded. These funds are available. You go and see and how skilled they are in sports. They are better skilled than our general population. Hockey, you know how they play they well. Till now, OMBADC has sanctioned amount of 18,215.12 crores towards agriculture and farmer empowerment, sports and youth services, electronics and information technology, fisheries and animal resources development, forest and environment and climate change. A fisheries kotha kouchuti. I have gone and seen Sundargarh. I learnt a lot from them. Gote chotiya ghore, edi chotiya tank re macha uthute. I said, what is this? How it is happening? They have picked up. They have picked up. And I saw the first time, କହିଲେ Mr. Jagadananda କହିଲେ ଯେ ଖରାପ ହେଉଛି ତାଙ୍କ farm produces ଗୁରା. So we were always thinking cold storage ଟା କେମିତି କରାଯାଏ. Gradually if you apply your mind cold storage କେମିତି କରାଯିବ ଦେଖିଲା ବେଳେ ବହୁତ ଜାଗାରେ ଆମେ କ'ଣ now new କରୁଛୁ 5 tons 10 tons cold storage by solar power. छोट छोट रूम କରୁଛୁ ତା ଭିତରେ ଯାଇକି କିଏ କଦଳୀ ଥୋଇଛି କିଏ ଆଉ କ'ଣ ତା ଫ୍ରୁଟ୍ସ ଥୋଇଛି ଯେତେବେଳେ ପ୍ରାଇସ୍ ଉଠୁଛି ବିକୁଛନ୍ତି ପ୍ରାଇସ୍ ଯେତେ ଲୋ ଅଛନ୍ତି ବିକୁନାହାନ୍ତି. ସେ କାମ କଲେ ଫିଲ୍ଡରେ କାମ କଲେ ନୂଆ ନୂଆ ଆଇଡ଼ିଆ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରାଇକ୍ କରିବ ନୂଆ ନୂଆ ଜିନିଷ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରାଇକ୍ କରିବ କିନ୍ତୁ ସେଠିକୁ ଯିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ ବୁଝିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ ତାଙ୍କ ଦରକାରଟା କେମିତି ଚାଲିବ. ଇଫ୍ ୟୁ ଥିଙ୍କ ରିମୋଟ୍ ଏରିଆରେ କେମିତି ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ହେବ କେମିତି ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ହେବ କାହିଁକି ହେବନି. But those correct decisions have to be taken. Go ଜିନିଷଟା କଲେ ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ହେବ. You must go and see in those areas how they are developing. Right. ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ଯାଇଥିଲି ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ଏରିଆ ସୁନ୍ଦରଗଡ଼ରେ କଦଳୀ ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟେସନ୍ କରିଛନ୍ତି ଫ୍ୟାଣ୍ଟାଷ୍ଟିକ୍ ଆଉ ସବୁ ବିକ୍ରି ହେଉଛି. ମାଛ ତକ ସୁନ୍ଦରଗଡ଼ରେ ମୁଁ କହିଲି କିଏ କିଣୁଛି କିଏ ନା ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ଆମର ସୁନ୍ଦରଗଡ଼ ପାଖରେ NTPC ଅଛି ସେ ଆସିକି ନେଇଯାଉଛନ୍ତି ଫ୍ରେଶ୍ ତଡ଼କା ମାଛ. There is market also there. So everything is possible. ଆମେ କେତେବେଳେ ଫାଇନାନ୍ସ କରୁଛୁ ଗୋଟେ କପଲ ଗୋଟ ସେ କପଲ ଗୋଟାଏରୁ 12ଟା ହେଇଗଲାଣି. ଏତେ ଲାଷ୍ଟ ଭିସି ଯାଇଥିଲି କହିଲେ ଆଜ୍ଞା ଆପଣ ଫାଇନାନ୍ସ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ଗୋଟେ ସେଡ୍ କରୁଛି ମୋତେ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ସେଡ୍ର ଟଙ୍କା ଦିଅନ୍ତୁ ନା କାହିଁକି ମୁଁ ବଢ଼ି ଚାଲିଛି 12ଟା 24 ହେଇଯିବେ 24ଟା ମଲ୍ଟିପ୍ଲାଏ କରିବେ. And they earn a lot of money. They earn a lot of money. If you go in the field, you will see how they are improving and they are very happy. Chattu korchate women self-employed. They are funding. They are very happy in the interior areas. Wonderful work. Then higher education, then housing and urban development, higher education, handlooms, textiles, handicrafts, Mission Shakti, Panchayat Raj, and drinking water, roads, and so and so. School and mass education, charity toka kharcha hoichi. School hostel notala hostel diya hoichi. Smart classes hoichi. These state government funds, but it didn't have that much of funds to provide everything. We have provided hostels for these ideal schools. During my tour of tribal areas in the districts of Keonjhar, Bhubaneswar, I have found that these projects undertaken by the OMBADC have improved the lives of tribal beneficiaries of OMBADC projects. Sato kotha kahi mu the first time gali 2018 re khali survey kariya pai tokata kuade kharcha kariba ame eta tanga aschu confidence notala se lokon ku dekhuteli collectorate officer jo boski discuss karteli se mo sangare bi kete expert jaitele से बहुत लगा केमती खर्च करेंगे इतने टका कोटी खर्च कर परिबे कैपेसिटी कहीं किंतु एक ही तरह विजिट करछे ताके साथ डिस्कस करछी they have confidence, they have identified the projects, their thought lines are very clear, their responses are very fast. ए केमती होउची टका आछी खर्च होउची टका होउची खर्च होउची रिव्यू होउची from time they know the work. Odia loko come nuance, they are very good, but they are not getting opportunities. In the field, once they get the opportunities, go around and see how in 2018, now it is 2025. Last visit was in December 2024 I went. Big change in the field, big change in the implementing agencies, big change in the officers who are doing it, efficiency has grown up. How it is happening? It can happen. In the judgment of Goa Foundation versus University of India and others, dated 21/4/2014, the Green Bench, at this time all these were Green Bench, I was heading it. Supreme Court directed that Mining leases of iron ore will have to pay 10% of the sale price of iron ore sold by them to Goa Iron Ore Permanent Fund will be used for sustainable development and intergenerational equity in different districts of Goa. The direction given. It is spent in the districts. Right. This idea was incorporated by this Modi government in section 9B of the Mines and Mineral Development Regulation Act 1987 to constitute a district mineral foundation, DMF, which was to work in the interest and benefit of persons in areas affected by mining related operations. It is provided in section 9B that every holder of mining lease shall, in addition to royalty, pay to DMF of the district a certain amount not exceeding the royalty. Since the DMF has been created, thousands of crores have been deposited every year as district mineral fund in different mining districts in India. In Odisha, Keonjhar has the highest amount of district mineral fund and has been able to establish a medical college set up out of district mineral fund. Various other projects in Keonjhar district which could not be funded by OMBADC due to priorities and expenditure fixed by the Supreme Court have been funded from the funds of DF. Mo poko aile goda loko kala ga apno mining corridor ta kar diyantu road because of pollution. I said I can't construct this road. 2,000, 3,000 crores could provide karibi. And our Supreme Court does not guideline does. I can provide a connectivity. But a gaah ko ambulance ta jai parni. What a connectivity pai jimti se ambulance nahi kiri. Taku patient ko health center ko ani paribo. Say it provide kar paibe. But a big road I can't finance because it's not within our scheme. But now OMBADC has funded it. This is near Joda. Because the money has now come. And OMBADC taka to kharcha hai jibo. Sarigale how hobani. Every year DMF in Keonjhar and other all these mining districts will accumulate funds and they'll keep on spending in this tribal dominated mineral bearing areas. For formulation of policy and identification projects for development of tribal population, we need to set up tribal research institutes. The needs of the tribals are very peculiar and cannot be properly understood by authorities sitting either in Delhi or Bhubaneswar. This is what I have been saying. Every state having a substantial tribal population must have a TRI located in a tribal area. They should collect data and make surveys of tribal areas and conduct research for the purpose of formulating the appropriate policies and plans for development of referral tribal population. As the oversight authority of OMBADC, I have proposed that a TRI be set up in Nagar and a piece of land has also been identified. I hope in the near future we are able to set up a TRI in Nagar. We have a tribal research, a tribal museum in Bhubaneswar, but we don't have a tribal research institute. Some states have. I am told there's one in Ranchi also. What I am thinking is, basically, you have to collect a lot of data by going around the tribal areas. And then you have to do a lot of research to find out what policies, what decisions will really benefit the tribals. And accordingly spend the money for them. Now today, most of the policies are being formulated from the government of India. Opura a state level hoche. Mu kon ko reverse process ta karo. Yes, there is Gram Sabha, but they also need assistance. They are not that educated people. They need assistance. They should guide them. So that sort of an institute must be thought of. And if that is thought of, I am sure a lot of people will benefit. It should go on as a continuous process, as part of the economic development of those areas. and how the different projects have an impact, right? Sometimes we think this will have happened. It does not have. I'll give you a small example. I went to Keonjhar in 2018 to decide what projects to take up, what projects. In the health sector, the collector showed me 4 kiosks, health kiosks. There a patient has to go and sit before the television type thing, and some doctor from Calcutta or Bombay or somewhere will consult to television, telemedicine. And then, what is your problem? He said, my leg is paining. He said, all right, get this X-ray done and send, in the meanwhile take this medicine. So they suggested, we have 4 now, why not have 40 more? But I said, no, this is not the way done. I considered it. This is not the way done, how it has to be done. It has to be through the public health centers, community health centers, and district headquarter centers. We'll fund them instead of going to this. This is a private public model. Because the doctors have to examine the patient, have to see, have to guide them. And that is how we rejected that idea. So, which project will work, which project will not work, it has to be examined very carefully. If it is examined properly and implemented, the project, in my experience, is bound to succeed. Right. At the end, I like to say that tribal population in India, unlike the disadvantaged groups like the Dalits, are not organized to fight for their rights, and have preferred to endure the exploitation silently. You see, you had Dr. Ambedkar, a leader from the Dalit community. So many leaders have come. They are also great political leaders. Right? Jagjeevan Ram, so many political, they fight. They fight for their Dalit. But tribals are helpless. They need somebody. Earlier they will revolt. And they are still revolting. Insurgent activities are going on. Naxalism, so on and so forth. But they require proper guidance. And for that guidance can be given organizations like yours. In some areas in India, such as Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Odisha, and the northeastern region, some tribals who could not tolerate the exploitation have taken to armed insurgency. However, armed insurgency has always been suppressed by the state and has never succeeded in bringing about tribal development. The tribal communities must proactively voice their grievances, engage in continuous dialogue with the state, and actively participate in Panchayat Raj institutions to ensure their concerns are addressed. You see, I have shown so many acts have been passed, so many laws have been passed, so many provisions are made for tribal development, but tribal community is not aware of it. So it is civil society organizations, including NGOs like CYSD, have a vital role in educating the tribal population about the rights and entitlement under various state and laws. This awareness will empower them to peacefully claim their rights and access the support available from the government, justice system, and other relevant authorities for us. We have legal aid also for the tribals, free legal aid. These have to be, they should be aware of their rights. You make them aware of the rights and ensure that they get the benefits, lot things will change in the ground. This is the most important function that you have to do. I remember once I was sitting in the Raipur airport and I saw a police officer sitting there. We introduced each other. I said, what I had got to Bastar? What? Very bad tribal situation, very bad Naxalist activities. I asked them, very bad Naxalite activities. Then I said, but Naxalism has reduced tremendously in Odisha. He said that is because of welfare measures which have been adopted in Odisha. These welfare measures through measures, Naxalites are convinced now the better course is to come to the mainstream and get those benefits rather than keep on fighting. So that editor also says, fighting will not do also. You have to ask for rights. So both to the government and say just killing them will not do. And to the what we call tribals, I would say, your insurgency will not do. You must find out some way to negotiate a development.